could be BC's version of Big Game Country. Actually, it's the Northern Animal Exchange in Mission, a one-of-a-kind operation where exotic and domestic animals are trained for motion pictures, television, and commercial productions. Good evening and welcome to Red's Classic Theater. Trainer Jerry Terrian handles all the animals, and he'll give us a demonstration a little later on. Our movie this week is the third motion picture made with the same title. Ours is the 1950 version, Never a Dull Moment, starring Irene Dunne and Fred MacMurray. Miss Dunne was one of Hollywood's best-loved screen comedians, particularly in the 30s and 40s. However, tonight's movie about a Manhattan socialite adjusting to life on a ranch occurred quite late in her career. As a matter of fact, Irene Dunne made only 2 more motion pictures, retiring from movies in 1952 to look into political pursuits. And now here's Act 1 of Never a Dull Moment, starring Irene Dunne and Fred MacMurray. Hope you're enjoying our movie tonight, Never a Dull Moment. And speaking of that, there's rarely a dull moment at the Northern Animal Exchange, which trains animals to appear in movies, TV, and commercials. The operation is located on the scenic Virtue Studio Ranch in Mission, BC, which also houses the Neon Rider and Black Stallion TV series. Trainer Jerry Terrian is rated as one of the top animal trainers in North America, with a long list of screen credits. Movies in which his animals have performed include The Fly, the locally filmed production Bird on a Wire with Mel Gibson and Goldie Hawn, and the Wes Craven thriller The Serpent and the Rainbow. Altogether, there are 21 animals on site, including lions, tigers, jaguars, cougars, Arctic wolves, a baboon, and some bears. However, the bears are in hibernation and won't be put through their paces today. In a moment, we'll be talking to animal trainer Jerry Terrian about these animals. In Mission, BC, I'm talking to animal trainer Jerry Terrian. Jerry, of all of the animals, which are the most difficult to train?
Well, in North America, the bears are the hardest animals to train, Red. And in South America, the jaguar, amongst all the exotics, the jaguar is the hardest cat to train.
You were telling me that the jaguar's teeth is so much pressure per inch, too. Like, I mean, it's as tough as jaws of all the cats, right?
That's right. They can bite through 1 inch of solid bone. They're the only cat in the world to bite and kill their prey by biting through the skull.
How do they adapt to a climate like this? Because South America very warm and BC being very mild. How do they adapt?
Well, in the rest of Canada, it's very, very hard for them to adapt. In Vancouver, we found it, or in British Columbia, we found it a lot easier because the temperature's a lot more mellow here. A little rain, but they're a tropical rainforest animal, so it's coming along real good.
And you never have a dull moment, right?
I never have a dull moment.
Which is a perfect cue to get back to our motion picture. Thank you, Jerry. Never a dull moment. Hope you're enjoying Never a Dull Moment on Red's Classic Theater, which was made in 1950. And the midpoint of the 20th century provided film-goers with a very entertaining year. Marlon Brando made his sensational film debut in The Men, playing a bitter paraplegic. Tough guy Jack Palance played a grim role to perfection as a plague-carrying criminal in Panic in the Streets. The movie of the year was All About Eve, in which Bette Davis made a stunning screen comeback after being written off by critics as a fading star. Jose Ferrer, who died a few weeks ago at the age of 80, was chosen as 1950's Best Actor for his performance as Cyrano de Bergerac. Another outstanding film of 1950 was the comedy Father of the Bride, starring Spencer Tracy. A remake of that movie was just released this past Christmas with Steve Martin in the lead role. And the original Father of the Bride is our feature movie next week on Red's Classic Theater. Now let's return to Never a Dull Moment. Well, from the Northern Animal Exchange, it's time to look at our mailbag, and joining me is little Chico here. Believe it or not, he's 21 years of age. Hard to believe, isn't it? E.G. Brown from Richmond wrote in wanting to see Tavarich, starring Claudette Colbert and Charles Boyer. And Kate Edwards requested Tom Jones. Kate lives in Courtenay. That movie starred Albert Finney and Susanna York. Now, if there's a motion picture you'd like to see or a suggestion of a location, write to Red Robinson, KVUS-TV in Vancouver. That's Red Robinson, KVUS-TV in Vancouver. Next week on Red's Classic Theater, Spencer Tracy and Elizabeth Taylor star in the original 1950 version of Father of the Bride. And coming up in 2 weeks, our first of 3 shows from jolly old England. We'll present the 1939 romance classic Wuthering Heights, starring Laurence Olivier and Merle Oberon. And now let's get back to our motion picture. Chico and I are anxious to see it as much as you are. Never a dull moment. This week on Red's Classic Theater, we're visiting the Northern Animal Exchange in Mission, BC. In researching tonight's movie, besides the title Never a Dull Moment being applied to 2 other motion pictures, we discovered no less than 20 movie titles that began with the word never. Now you talk about trivia. Never Cry Wolf starred Charles Martin Smith as real-life Canadian author Farley Mowat, who braved the Arctic to study the behavior of wolves. W.C. Fields was brilliantly insane in the 1941 comedy classic Never Give a Sucker an Even Break. And Melina McCurry caused a stir with her role in the 1960 movie Never on Sunday. The Never-Ending Story was a fantasy film that captivated children and adults. And in 1983, after a 12-year absence from the role that made him famous, Sean Connery returned to the screen as James Bond in Never Say Never Again. And now let's get back to our motion picture, Never a Dull Moment. We're visiting the Northern Animal Exchange in Mission, BC for this week's edition of Red's Classic Theater. And it's time for our movie trivia quiz. Slats, Jackie, and Tanner were 3 animal performers who appeared in motion pictures, and they had something unique in common. Can you tell us what it is? We'll be back with the answer in just a moment. Here's the answer to our movie trivia quiz. Slats, Jackie, and Tanner were all lions. They had that much in common. But they also appeared as the roaring lion at the opening of every MGM film. Of course, up to the 1940s, MGM had its lion's share of leading actors. And now let's get back to our movie, Never a Dull Moment. Well, that's a wrap for this week's edition of Red's Classic Theater. Hope you enjoyed Never a Dull Moment, starring Irene Dunne and Fred MacMurray. Be sure to join us next Sunday night on Red's Classic Theater for Father of the Bride with Spencer Tracy and Elizabeth Taylor. In the meantime, if you have a motion picture you'd like to see or a suggestion of a location, write to Red Robinson, KVOS-TV in Vancouver. We'd like to thank the good folks here at the Northern Animal Exchange, and in particular Jerry Terrian, for hosting our program. Jerry starts work on the Tarzan series in Mexico in the coming months with some of his animal friends here. And until next week when we bring you Father of the Bride, on behalf of Chico and myself, thank you for being with us, and good night, everybody.